Hi there, Gimena. Let's take a look at your new set of essays today. This one is about fathers staying home with their children while their wives work. Let's see what you wrote. Nowadays, fathers are more involved in childcare tasks when mothers are working. Experts throughout both the developed and developing world have pointed out that some of the main pointed out that no have pointed that some of the main reasons for this are the change in family structure and the increase in working mothers. I support the idea that this is a positive development, and this essay will prove this perspective using examples from Psychology Today Journal and Save the Children organization. All right, I like that. And the thing that I really like about it is the way you structured your thesis. You said what the main reasons are because that's what it asked you, and you also said that you support it and that it's a positive development. So you answered both questions really clearly in the introduction, and so that's great. All right, so let's move on. Fathers are no longer simply economic providers for their families. The role of provider through paid work is now, perhaps more than ever, one of the components of modern fatherhood. The central reason for this is twofold. Firstly, mothers are increasingly providing for their families through paid work, although they continue to shoulder a substantial, careful with the A. They continue to shoulder substantially more child care than men. Secondly, changing ideas around the familiar structure and role of fathers' time with children increased during several decades. Today's fathers are widely expected to play an active role in sharing the care of their children. Some recent analyses from Psychology Today provided evidence that fathers now spend more time on childcare, more time with children than in previous decades. However, it must not be forgotten that the focus on paid work continues to dominate male instead of female. Okay. There were a couple little things I want to change here grammatically. It was just really a couple of minor things. Let's see. I already mentioned this. And this was awkward during several decades. During the last decades. You can't say during several decades, okay? Let's see. All right, and then the rest of it is fine. Now, I do have one concern about this. They're asking you, why are men staying at home while women go and work? That's what they're asking you. They're assuming it's a given that men are staying home while their wives go out and work. So this is the premise that we're functioning with. But you didn't entirely mention that. You said instead that, fathers are becoming more involved in parenting, that, work and staying with children is just some of the components of their lives nowadays. You said here that women shoulder more child care. Let's see. So I didn't really feel like you were answering the question. You weren't really answering us why men are staying home while their wives are going out to work. What it felt like you were answering here is something entirely different, like how active are fathers in, or why do you think that the role of fathers has changed nowadays? Or how has the role of fathers in today's society changed? So that's kind of what it felt like you were answering, but it didn't really feel like you were talking about this. Look at this, even here. The focus on paid work continues to dominate males. That's a little awkward too. The focus on paid work continues to dominate. You don't mean male here. You mean something else. Continues to be a male rather than a female prerogative or a role, or I don't know. That you meant something else though. There's something awkward about this. So even in this statement, you're still not talking about what you're supposed to be talking about, okay? Because remember what I said before. The premise is fathers are staying home to take care of their children. Their wives are working. So that is not at all what you talked about, okay? So you said that basically that even though men are taking on more responsibilities, you know what? That bringing home money is still their main focus. And that's not what you're supposed to be talking about, okay? So there was some problem with the development of this. However, that said, I should tell you that you had a lot of really lovely vocabulary that I really liked. There were a handful of things like this: shoulder, more childcare. That was really nice. There were a couple of other things. Let's see. No longer simply economic providers. That was nice. Paid work. That's good. The role of provider is also really nice. So you had a handful of those things, and I really liked that. But again, for me, the big issue here is with the task achievement and how it wasn't really appropriately developed. All right. Now, in the next paragraph, you're supposed to be talking about if this trend of men staying home, if that's a positive or a negative. So let's see what you said. Furthermore, there is ample evidence confirming the positive outcome and importance of early father involvement in caring. For example, physical care, interactive care, teaching, accompanying, engages. Here I wanted an and then accompanying whom? You have to accompany somebody. So interactive care, teaching, and accompanying children, okay, engages fathers in their children's life, and they remain involved throughout the children's childhood. That's a little repetitive. First of all, you have children here, and then childhood. So not so great in terms of cohesion. So maybe you could have changed that up a little bit. Let's see. So interactive care, teaching, and accompanying children engages fathers in see in the youngsters' activities, okay, and they remained involved throughout their life. Okay, so you avoid that children and childhood. That was just one of the ways. Okay, I'm just trying to, off the top of my head, think of a solution for this, but maybe that could have been one way. So, a recent study from Save the Children showed that activities such as responsive and sensitive interaction, guiding behavior, setting limits, spending time to listen and talk about the child's concerns are likely to promote an emotionally secure environment and child well-being in its broadest sense, encouraging appropriate independent action, consistent with this line of thinking. Okay. According to a survey from PTJ fathers, involvement showed, you need a comma somewhere. That's why it's confusing. Consistent with this line of thinking, okay. According to a survey from PTJ, fathers, I think you need an apostrophe here, involvement also showed positive, get rid of the ly, impacts on academic outcomes. For example, school attendance, behavior, and attitude towards school and homework completion is critical for an appropriate academic development. Get rid of that and, because fathers play a critical role, careful with this, critical look, in a child's early development, and children are more likely to have a successful school experience. All right, I want to read your conclusion, then we'll come back to this paragraph. In conclusion, from the examples and arguments given, I firmly believe that the childhood model has changed in the last decades, consequently has a positive development in children's life. All right, this is exactly what I wanted to talk to you about. This is what I was saying to you in the first body paragraph, and it's what I was also going to tell you in the second body paragraph, that you're not really answering the question. It's as if you're answering something totally different. You're answering how the model for parenthood has changed, and how men's role in parenthood has changed, and is this positive or negative? But that's not what they asked you. Okay, so you really need to be clear about that, Gimena, and you need to answer just what they've asked you and not something related or something that you think they have asked you. So really, I want you to spend time reading these questions, making sure you understand the question. Okay, and just really being certain that you're answering what it is that you're supposed to. Okay, so that was my issue here. Again, there was a lot of really nice vocabulary. There were some little grammar mistakes here and there. It wasn't anything really, really serious, but I would like you to try to eliminate these as much as possible so you can assure a higher score as far as grammar is concerned. Okay, so that brings us to the end of your task 2. I want to look at your task 1 here. We've got this wonderful graph about rain. So let's see what you wrote here. well, we don't call it a line chart. We call them bar charts, pie charts, and we call them line graphs. Okay, so it's good to get that terminology straight. Okay, alrighty, so let's see. The line graph shows rainfall in milliliters of water in England, Scotland, and Wales in 2008. Okay. Overall, it is observable that the three countries fluctuated during the period, reaching their lowest points in February and April, whereas the highest points were in March, July, and October. Okay, fine. Let's go on. Two countries, Scotland and Wales, had the lowest rainfall between 20 and 50 milliliters. Scotland decreased in February and reached its lower mark at 20 ml, approximately followed by Wales at roughly 21 in April. At the same time, Scotland and Wales were the countries which went up to 130 ml. Scotland reached its maximum in March and October at 130, while Wales had the same number in July. England jumped between 75 to 120 during the whole period, hitting its lowest at 75 halfway between here, May and June, whereas its highest point was in July at 120. It is remarkable that Scotland experienced the largest fluctuation, followed by Wales in 2008. Regarding England, it's the country which has fluctuated the least. Okay, so this is more what I would have liked for your overview rather than this. You might have noticed that I kind of paused. I was like, okay. I thought you got a little detail-y, okay? You started talking about these months, February, April. I mean, that's not what an overview is supposed to do. It's not supposed to go into any detail, okay? So for me, this really felt like a more appropriate overview. All right, so this you could have basically left out and just really focused on this. Now, there is obviously not one way to do this line graph. I have in my head a way that I think really lends itself to this particular task, because as you probably figured out, you've got 36 pieces of data. You very correctly didn't try to include all of them. But there were a couple that I thought you should have included that you didn't. For example, I thought your treatment of England was a little underdeveloped. You essentially told me 2 points. You told me 75 and 120, and you told me when. Okay? You spent one sentence on England. And then I thought that the organization of Scotland and Wales was a little tricky. Okay, because you said that they had the lowest rainfall, but I don't know when this lowest rainfall was. And then you said that Scotland decreased in February, but I had no idea from where it decreased. So there was a little bit of confusion in this paragraph. And then in this paragraph, I thought you left out some information. Would have been helpful. So let me show you what I mean. Let me see if I can bring this up a little bit so we can get a clue. Oops, I think I overshot that. Hold on. Let's see if I can bring up the chart in a way that makes sense. Let's see. Okay, so as I said earlier, you basically have here 36 pieces of information. You should not and cannot mention all of them, but it is important to pick out and discuss those important points. So let's start with England. What are the important points here? You've got obviously 12. So what are the important ones? Well, when you look at a line graph that's showing you a year, because a lot of these do show an entire year from the beginning to end, I want you to think of it as a story. And when you are telling, or when you hear a story, there are certain points you want to know. You want to know the beginning of the story, you want to know the end of the story, but then you also want to know some major events in that story, okay, that happened between the beginning and the end. So as far as England goes, what are those main things? So, well, we know what the beginning is, it's right here. We know what the end is, that's right here. And then for me, the major points are those peaks and those lows. So, yes, as you mentioned, I would have also mentioned this. And then I also would have mentioned those, basically there's 3 peaks, okay? So you've got point 1, point 2, and then point 3, point 4, and 0.5. That's pretty much it for England. You don't need to mention anything else. Now, as for Scotland, again, there's about 5 points worth mentioning. So here's 1, the beginning. Here's 2, that low. Here's 3 and 4, those 2 peaks. And then the end, 5. Okay? And then can you guess how many there are for Wales? Yeah, there's about 5 again. So you've got the beginning, number 1, that low, number 2, this, number 3, and I also think that this plateau is really interesting because it's the only stability we have anywhere in this entire line graph. So that's number 4, and then of course the end is number 5. Okay, you can of course mention that all of these, I like that you mentioned there was a range for England, so you could talk about that, okay? But I do think that those are the important points worth mentioning in this graph. Is that the only way to do this particular graph? No, of course not. I would never imply that. But I do think it's an effective way of thinking about these line graphs and how you can kind of decide what to mention, because I know that some of these, especially when you have so much information, they can feel rather overwhelming. Okay, so hopefully that helps. It'll give you some ideas for how you can approach these. And I guess that leads us to the end of this correction. So go ahead, correct these, and let's see more work from you. Good luck.